Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to be considering some reasons that people might give for why Christianity is compelling. And so we'll start right out with what I'll refer to as the intuitive explanatory power of the Christian meta narrative. That is, that how Christianity seems to make sense of our lives in ways that I think is unrivaled in other worldviews. So what is it that we've learned in our study so far about how the biblical plot line and the Apostles' Creed teaches us to see the world? Well, it teaches us stuff like morality is real, good and evil are not illusions, that our lives can have meaning, that every human has inherent dignity and worth, that we have some measure of free wills because we are not um, simply the products of physics or fate. That personhood is not an illusion. That there is something real about our individual selves. That death is not the end. Our instincts that surely there's something more. That our instincts that love is central to reality finds its basis in the Trinity, as we've already looked at. That the best lives are characterized by peace, mercy, and sacrificial love. Obviously, Christianity gives a basis for believing that our lives are meant to look like Christ, who lived this life of peace and mercy and sacrificial love and so forth. And our kind of instinct is, yes, that is inherently beautiful. And Christianity offers a reason for why that would be beautiful. That the natural world is full of wonder and beauty and goodness. That some worldviews would see that the natural world is the problem that we need to escape from. It's this kind of evil thing or illusory thing. But Christianity is going to say, no, it's good. And at the same time, Christianity is going to recognize that something's not right with this. And so instinctively we think there's something good and beautiful here. And instinctively we think something's broken. And Christianity gives us a way of understanding that kind of back and forth sense that we have. And it maps onto our view that our experience that humans can't fix everything, that the hope for humanity on its own to achieve utopia seems to be naive to the reality of the world around us, the reality of human history, which isn't to say that humans can't do some good, but it is to say that often it's coupled with some bad. And so we need something, someone to come who's kind of beyond, above, transcendent, to bring total restoration. Um, and Christianity says there is reason to expectantly hope for restoration. This isn't just wishful thinking, but there is reason to expect for things to be made right socially, physically, spiritually. And one of the main things Christian points to is the resurrection. If the resurrection really happened, and we'll get to reasons to believe that it really did, then there is hope that a new world, a new kind of wholeness is breaking into our world. So, even to look back over this list that I go over in more detail in the book, the Christianity is the only worldview I know of that can hold on to all of these things simultaneously. Now, other worldviews might be able to take bits and pieces of this, but Christianity I think can hold on to all of these simultaneously. And so, to what Christianity offers is this kind of unrivaled explanatory power. It makes sense of our lives, um, and to reject Christianity would seem to force one to say, yeah, at least one, if not several of those bullet points aren't real. That our instincts are wrong about these things. All right. So that's one piece that I think is really exciting. Another is the historical evidence for the resurrection. No, you can't historically prove the resurrection, but there are some reasons to say, it does seem like that this is likely a historical event. That it's not just kind of in this realm of like myth and legend that has no basis in history at all. So, how might we say that? Well, one thing to realize is that in the ancient world, the language of resurrection was referring to bodily, physical rising from the death. This wasn't about a spirit or a ghost, but it was bodily. Um, and that Christian notion of resurrection was distinct and unprecedented in the ancient world. That the idea of this bodily resurrection was it just didn't map on the ancient Greco-Roman world. No, there is no there. Your spirit might live on, but not your but not your body. Gross. That doesn't even make sense. And in the Jewish world, you had some Jews who denied resurrection, like the Sadducees, and you had some who believed in the resurrection. So, if you're kind of narrowing things down here, almost no one in the ancient Greco-Roman world believed in resurrection, except for maybe some of the Jewish people. But even those Jews who believed in the resurrection, they did not expect a dying and rising, a resurrected Messiah. And they didn't expect one individual to rise prior to the great resurrection. That is, if For those, so nobody in the Greco-Roman world, only some Jews, even those Jews who believed in the resurrection, didn't expect a dying Messiah or one person to resurrect before the great resurrection at the end of all time. So Christianity is doing something distinct and unprecedented. Um, and they are reframing. It's another distinct Christian thing, is they are reframing the resurrection beyond the focus of the restoration of Israel. So it's helpful to realize that what Christianity is claiming is something distinct. Why would they make this up? Why would they claim this? It doesn't even fit anyone's expectations. If you're going to make up a story, why make up the story? Which is exactly our third point here. This is not the story they would have likely fabricated, because it didn't fit the ancient Greco-Roman expectations. It didn't even fit the Jewish expectations. Plus, if they're going to make up a story, why would the earliest kind of first witnesses reported to the resurrection be women whose testimony was less valued and sometimes dismissed in the ancient Greco-Roman world? This isn't the kind of witnesses you would fabricate. And even the gospel accounts, the kind of authoritative accounts that Christians point to, Jesus is often kind of not immediately recognized. Like, if you're going to fabricate a story, it's going to be like immediate. You know exactly who he is. There's no question about it. And yet that's not the story they tell. And they're rarely kind of giving these proof texts that are like, this is exactly how it happened, what was expected in the Old Testament, here's how it looks. Now you have Jesus saying like, this fulfills it, but it's not the same as like, you have this kind of, here our next point, it doesn't clearly fit Old Testament expectations. That is, the hints and the passages that might speak to resurrection in the Old Testament, the account of Jesus' resurrection is not like it was made to fit those things exactly. There might be a little correspondence, but if you're going to fabricate a story and you're trying to convince Jews, you would think you would fabricate it so it looked like an identical match to whatever Old Testament kind of scriptural witness there might be to this, and it doesn't. And it doesn't clearly fit messianic expectations. There were other would-be messiahs, other people who claimed to be Messiah around that time, who were killed, and nobody claimed they were resurrected because people weren't expecting a resurrected Messiah. So here again, the disciples are making a claim that doesn't fit ancient Greco-Roman expectations, and it doesn't fit Jewish expectations, and even the way they tell it is odd, with women witnesses and Jesus not recognized immediately, and it not kind of made to fit Old Testament resurrection and messianic expectations. Plus, for them to pull this off, for anyone to even begin to believe in this, it would take the risk of trying to ensure the tomb was empty. And how are you going to steal the body? Although it's not unheard of, but it's still, it just adds one more layer to the difficulty of why they would make up this story. And they would have to convince people to believe they actually saw something that no one was expecting to see. And it's all going to lead to persecution. So why, if they're going to make up a story, would they make up this story? N.T. Wright says if they're going to make up a story, they would have done a better job. So they might have said something like, we just had this vision of Jesus. Okay, then you don't have to have an empty tomb or eyewitness testimony. You can just claim you had a vision. The ancient Greco-Roman world could be like, okay, sure, maybe you had a vision. That certainly doesn't require some weird thing like one who's died to be physically raised from the dead. And that's not what they claim. They claim something else that just doesn't fit. Why would they claim something that doesn't fit and then do so even at great risk? Well, it appears because they actually really believed it. It was this kind of paradigm shift. It was so unexpected, and yet it seems to be the case. And so if you read in this, you'll see that there's reason to see that the empty tomb was likely a historical event, and that there really does seem to be some significant eyewitness claims. Now, none of that proves that this was a historical event, but you can feel the weight of this. It's like they're doing something that doesn't fit expectations. If they were going to make it up, you would expect what they made up to better fit expectations. And instead of it fitting expectations, and then they even tell a story that is, or their account of it, seems to be just the last kind of thing you would make up, all so they might be persecuted, and this is backed up by what seems to be legit claims about an empty tomb and eyewitnesses. And keep in mind that that's a lot of eyewitnesses that they're making claim to, who would still be alive at the time that they were making claims that there are multiple eyewitnesses. And how are you going to get that many people to claim to have seen something that was on no one's mind to see? Also, that might lead to persecution. So here are reasons to see that maybe there's some good reason to believe in the resurrection. So more details can be found in the book. And finally, we might consider the cosmic evidence for a creator. And here is where we kind of take the offensive here. So, that sometimes there's this view that science and cosmology has kind of pushed God to the margins, and there is no room for him. But and the Bible's all archaic or whatever. But if we've been paying attention to what we've been doing in this in our study so far, and we're thinking about there's this Creator God who's transcendent, who's made everything. Um, and we're recognizing that the biblical account might be written in genres that allow for some flexibility of description. We come back and consider something like the beginnings of the universe that often people might attach to kind of atheistic view. And in fact, there's good reason to see actually the cosmology might point to a creator. It doesn't prove it, but it might point to it. After all, this might be surprising to learn that it was a Catholic priest who first proposed the Big Bang model. And it was initially rejected because the Big Bang suggested a beginning in a time where the consensus, maybe the prevailing consensus, was that the cosmos was eternal. And so you don't need a God if you've got this kind of eternal cosmos. But the Big Bang would say, no, there was a kind of a beginning point. And people are like, that's too Christian, that's a move to squeeze God into this, because to postulate a beginning is to say that maybe there was a beginner. So anyway, just to claim there's a beginning point, because we just know stuff doesn't pop into existence out of absolute nothingness. That is, you take away all matter, all physics, and then all of a sudden matter and physical laws and gravity and all that stuff. I mean, that doesn't happen. I mean, and I don't know anyone who thinks that who's had an experience of something just kind of popping into existence out of absolute nothingness. So the very fact that something came into existence and that doesn't happen suggests maybe something is operating from without, from kind of beyond. And there is no good explanation for this. Another piece of kind of cosmic evidence for a creator is what seems to be the fairly established notion that our universe is what's often called finely tuned for organic life. That there are certain parameters that very, very highly kind of specific. That if they were just the most minuscule amount different, might have meant that perhaps no cosmos at all, that the Big Bang would have just collapsed in upon itself, or it would have expanded so quick that stars couldn't have formed and there could have never been life. But things had to be basically just right for there to be a chance for there to be something like life as we know it. And how do we explain that just one in a bajillionth chance of that happening? Well, one of the easiest ways is to say, God created it this way. And there is no good rival scientific theory on this that is fully satisfying. The most prevalent one is the highly speculative notion of the multiverse, and there is some reason maybe to believe in a multiverse. But if you'll notice in the reading, the multiverse doesn't necessarily fix the problem. That maybe there is a multiverse. I don't know, but they pointing to the multiverse as a solution doesn't necessarily solve the issue of fine tuning because, because of certain things like, one, there is no clear evidence of a multiverse. It's highly speculative. Two, for the multiverse to work as an explanation, it would have to be generating lots and lots of universes, just bajillions and bajillions of universes. But not only would it need to be generating bajillions and bajillions of universes, but bajillions and bajillions of universes that were all different from one another, so that there might be some minuscule chance that it would happen upon the right parameters that would allow for life. But the multiverse, even the speculations, as I understand about the multiverse, are that it doesn't generate that much, if it did at all. And then there's also the part of where the multiverse come from. And plus, we see this incredible order in our universe. And if this universe were this kind of grand accident, we might expect it to be kind of disorderly and chaotic. But But one of the fascinating things about physics and mathematics is the way it can describe. And it can not only describe but predict what's going on in the universe. And so the presence of order suggests that this world is made orderly, which suggests something like a rational creator rather than a kind of happenstance, chaotic accident. So I know we had to run through these briefly. I think these are important things to keep in mind. That there are scientific, historical, intuitive, kind of logical reasons to see that Christianity is compelling and reasonable. You can't prove it. There's still this need for, I think, the Holy Spirit to do His work of shaping our hearts and opening our us and our brokenness to His gracious offer. But maybe what we can do in this past study, where we looked at challenges to the Christian system, and this study, where we look at certain reasons that Christianity is compelling, is to remove some stumbling blocks and to say, Christianity isn't about sticking your head in the sand. This doesn't have to be simply kind of close your eyes, plug your ears, kind of thing. But actually, there is something really compelling about this.